Thank you very much for coming on the programme and talking to us about these rising tensions that we've seen between India and Pakistan. We've heard from the government calling on both sides to de-escalate the conflict. And I guess my question is, what can the British government actually do here?
Well, look, after the horrific terrorist attack in Pahalgam in Jammu and Kashmir, and as tensions on the subcontinent escalate, and as videos of the destruction circulate within the community, especially on social media platforms, many people around the world, including my Slough constituents of Indian and Pakistani heritage, they're extremely concerned, they're worried about the safety of their loved ones, especially those living in Punjab and Kashmir, because they are living on the border and they are the ones that are going to be most impacted, and in fact already have been impacted by the deaths and injuries within this escalating conflict.
You talked there about your constituency, and I think a lot of our viewers will really recognise that. I think there's over 3 million Brits with Indian or Pakistani heritage. It must be very personal, and including to yourself as well.
Yes.
Your parents came to the UK from India. How has it been the last few weeks?
Well, that's why a lot of people are very, very worried. I've got family members living close to the Indo-Pak border. So for many of us, this is very, very real. And remember, Sophie, we're dealing with two nuclear-armed nations, and there have been tensions for several years. But after that recent terrorist attack, I think now we're seeing that tension rise. And as I said on the floor of the House earlier today, when the Minister made his statement, that we, as individuals with historic ties, while we convey our condolences to all those affected, recognising our special responsibility to the subcontinent, it is incumbent on our government to be at the forefront of efforts to de-escalate tensions, and also to help enable negotiations that can lead to peace and prosperity in the long term for the subcontinent.
So it's a moral obligation, you see it as?
No, definitely. And at a time when we have close ties with both nations, we've seen that the government has recently negotiated a UK-India free trade agreement, which obviously will be signed formally in the near future. We've got very close ties likewise with Pakistan. So it is in our collective interest as allies for us to enable a diffusing of tensions. And that is very, very important, because at the moment, the only thing that we see are bullets flying or bombs dropping, and that is not good either for India or Pakistan or for global peace, especially when we're dealing with two nuclear-armed nations.
We've had lots of MPs talking about this, a very charged debate in the House of Commons. We've also had an intervention from the former Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. He tweeted to say no nation should have to accept terrorist attacks being launched against it from land controlled by another country. India is justified in striking terrorist infrastructure. There can be no impunity for terrorists. Do you agree with what he said?
Well, look, we are all awaiting the findings of various investigations. I think both nations have made allegations against one another. What we need to do at this present time is to help de-escalate tensions rather than get involved in who did what, when and where. That is for both sides to establish.
So it's unhelpful, do you think, that kind of...
No, I don't think that at this point in time that we should be seen as the UK to be taking sides with one or the other. Our job is to enable peace. And as I said previously in Parliament, we've had, for example, the Kartarpur Sahib corridor, which was a corridor, a peace corridor between both nations, whereby Sikh pilgrims who were disconnected from their places of worship in Pakistan, the Pakistan government enabled that. So that was an excellent initiative. And we need further such corridors across the border. But at the moment, because of that horrendous terrorist attack, things have become very, very tense. So we need to show that leadership, and we need to bring people together rather than get involved in divisive politics.
You talked about peace quite a lot in this interview. How hopeful are you that there will be peace?
Well, look, it's for the benefit of both India and Pakistan. I think if they don't go towards the path of peace and prosperity, they themselves will be the biggest losers, unfortunately. it could lead to billions of pounds of extra trade along the border. And I know that people on both sides of the border, there are many people, peace-loving people, who want that from their governments. Now, at the present time, I mean, even with the UK, we've signed, we're in the midst of signing that trade deal with India. And what we've seen with that, Sophie, is there is an estimated, according to experts, an estimated increase in bilateral trade between UK and India of £26 billion, an increase in UK GDP of 4.8 billion, a boost to jobs on account of £2 billion year in, year out. Now, that's two distant nations. Just imagine if two neighbouring nations could have that trade and those benefits that would be derived from it. And we within Europe we're celebrating VE Day. And we know that as a continent within Europe, we've had such fractious relationship between different nations. But then we've managed to negotiate towards that peace. I know we've got a very precarious situation at the moment in Ukraine, and unfortunately we've got aggression and a nation that believes in subjugation and imperialism. But that aside, most of the other European nations, they have moved forward, and that's what I think is important in the long run to benefit both India and Pakistan.
We've spoken about some really important things in this interview, and I can tell your passion for this interview throughout the interview in talking about them. But I did just want to, if I may, just get your reflections on what's happening in the Labour Party at the minute as well, because there has been some criticism from some backbenchers that the local election results fell on deaf ears in the party. There hasn't been a U-turn on winter fuel. I just wonder where your sort of head is at, if you like.
Well, I felt very passionately about the previous issue because my MPhil was in South Asian history and emanating from that land. But likewise, I feel very, very passionate about the policies that our government will be enacting. And yes, the recent elections, they were very disappointing for us. And I think we've got to listen and we've got to learn and we've got to move forward. Personally, I think we've got to be within that listening mode. I hope that the Prime Minister and the government will be looking at, in particular, proposals with regards to welfare reforms. There's a lot of concern around that.
The disability changes.
With regards to PIP and disability benefits, a lot of my Slough constituents have got in touch with me. I've just raised that issue on the floor of the House as well.
Yeah.
So a lot of us...
So you'd like to see at least a partial U-turn on that issue? Then?
It's not about a U-turn. It's about proposals that are being made, and a government which is in listening mode should be looking at what is the electorate saying, and we need to make sure that it's our moral duty, it's our responsibility to look after the most vulnerable within our community, whether that's in Slough, whether that's elsewhere across the country. So I hope that the government will be taking on board that all of that feedback, and many of us as MPs are giving that feedback in various meetings happening here in Westminster, and then we need to take corrective action.
OK, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.